Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cold Chain Council webinar. Our theme for today is the new normal, evolving our global supply chain with the power of data and technology. My name is Kevin Lynch, and I am Director of Sales with QProducts and Services, your proud host for all the Cold Chain Council events. Some of you folks have joined our live events in recent years, and we appreciate you joining us again today and your support. For those who may be new to Cold Chain Council, I can tell you it was created for the food and pharma industries back in 2016. And we did this with the purpose of bringing professionals together within those markets and provide them with a platform to connect with one another and in an intimate setting and discuss cold chain challenges, learn about best practices and emerging technologies that are being adopted throughout the industry. And it's been a successful venture for us thus far. And we're certainly very excited to have each and every one of you here today. We are a little disappointed we couldn't host this event live, but in the spirit of silver linings, we are also excited because we get to reach a larger audience and we get to share some important content with you. And we've got a couple of excellent presenters here today, and Amy and Don, who I'm going to introduce to you shortly. We appreciate your time and attention in advance today and hope you take away some value from today's discussion. Before we get started, I've got a couple housekeeping notes to run through. We have a format set up where Amy and Don will each get a chance to present a case study and talk to you all. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A throughout each of those presentations. So please do submit your questions. And then we're going to pivot into a fireside chat, which will be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that discussion with Amy and Don, and we hope you enjoy it as well. Like I said, please submit your questions when ready. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Beginning first will be Amy Shortman, Director of Marketing for Overhaul. Amy was kind enough to moderate our event last fall for the Pharmaceutical Cold Chain Council, so we're certainly glad to have her back today. And then after Amy speaks, Don will be on board. Don Durm is Vice President of Customer Solutions at PLM Trailer Leasing. Don's a big advocate of speaking at conferences throughout our industry. I'm sure some of you folks have heard him before. Both of these individuals have a long list of accolades and much respect from their peers in the industry. So please do check out their bios and you can learn more about them individually. At this time, I would like to bring Amy on board. Good morning, Amy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Kevin. It's afternoon here, so it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But yeah, very happy to be here, and only sad this week when I came up on my agenda that I was due to be traveling over to Chicago for this event in person. So, but thank you to Cold Chain Council for putting on these events, and also to QProducts for hosting it, and for all of you who are attending this afternoon. So the new normal is something that we're all adapting to over the last few months since March and the COVID pandemic. My new normal is not only working full time, but also homeschooling. And over here, schools don't close until July the 17th. So we are seeing how resilient we are as professionals and also as people in terms of adapting. And it's quite exciting seeing how industry and businesses have adapted as well to what is the new normal. So today I'm going to be sharing with you what Overhaul are doing in terms of digitalizing within the supply chain, and how some of our new customers and existing customers have fared and through their own journey through the COVID pandemic, how they've adapted and how data has added value to their supply chain. A little bit about the company and our sort of changes and call to action to address the COVID pandemic, and how situations like this that are beyond control often help businesses to sort of pivot and go into new directions, and how we're using some of that data to address issues and to support the supply chain. So next slide, please. So I'm going to start out with Cold Chain Council. So we're going to be looking at what challenges there are in the industry. Most of these are pretty mainstay, and they spread all of the way from food and beverages all of the way to pharma. So things like deviation, temperature, humidity, shock, that's something that has an impact on healthcare and pharmaceutical products and also food products as well. Things like quality issues, counterfeit medicines, falsified medicines, entering into the legal supply chain is a big issue for the healthcare industry, and all industries, even consumer electronics and the pharma and food, have the risk from theft and criminals of taking their product. So when we combine these with additional risks such as situational events, it could be the COVID pandemic. Quite a few years ago, we had volcanic ash cloud, which had massive disruption within supply chain logistics as well. And we start seeing the risk and how we need to manage and mitigate these risks within the supply chain. Primarily for the end users to have products that are safe and effective to use, and that's pertinent with the food industry as it is with pharma. But in addition, for operational efficiencies, so when we look at processes, quality processes like CAPA, corrective action and preventative action, we know that historical investigations looking retrospectively back within the supply chain to see what's gone wrong can be incredibly costly, and the average CAPA investigation can cost anything between $2,000 to $3,000 US. So times that by every single issue that you have within your supply chain, and you can start to see that how digital solutions in companies like Overhaul, who are managing these in real time to prevent this retrospective investigation, start to create value through optimization. Next slide, please. And so what we're doing is with managing risk, and it's something that I've been working with for the last sort of 22 years, we have a support mechanism out there which are global compliance guidelines, and really they're there to set a basis as to how we should be working and how we manage risk to create an optimal supply chain and the products to be safe and effective. So we take things like good distribution practices, which anyone knows me knows I'm very passionate about. We've got things like the medical device regulation, the falsified medicines directive, and in the US, the Drugs Quality Security Act. And with all of those, what they're doing is setting a standard of how people should be moving products around the world. With us, in terms of the in-transit protection of products, that's what's paramount. But we're also bringing in those other logistics optimizations, so things like on-time performances and then resulting in operational efficiencies. Then what we have is the proactive approach. So we know risk is always going to be there. We need to proactively manage it and then have a mechanism for correcting any non-conformances within the supply chain. So an example would be maybe a route deviation, or it could be a temperature alert saying that product's going above optimal temperature. And it's one thing getting a notification that that's happening, that's great. But it's another thing actually having a corrective action that then directs and puts forward a solution within the supply chain in real time. And that's really what Overhaul is about. It's about managing the risk, but also being there to correct and to prevent something happening to the product in real time. And we bring all of this together on a global basis, multimodal for all modes of transport, into a single unified view. We do work with everyone from enterprise shippers, manufacturers, all of the way through to 3PLs and brokers. But what it does is in a sense the same thing. It's bringing together multiple data sources into one view. And we all know that data is becoming something that is there's a fear factor, because data in itself, it isn't really of any value. It's the context that you put it in and the actions that you take that drive really the value from that data. So we do everything by exception management, managing to our customers' standards of care. And then we also understand, being experts within the various fields that we serve, that various stakeholders within your own organizations have different uses for that data. So having a dashboard where you can customize the information security, logistics, and quality see, and what really matters to them is really important. Next slide, please. So how we do this is we will connect with any data, any source that's out there, and I think it's quite nice having the next presentation as well, which gives you an example of what we would consider to be a vendor of one of these sources, explaining kind of how they're operating. But what we do is we collect, so that might be fleet telematics, it might be a trailer system, GPS, temperature devices, and we aggregate all of that information. In addition to the multimodal elements of flight vessel tracker, we have various digitizing solutions. So that might be a driver mobile app where they can take information, EPODs, BOLs in real time, and that all goes up onto the cloud. So we're starting to see aggregation of multiple fragmented sources coming together. So a shipper might have three 3PLs that they're using, and they might have 7 different types of temperature monitoring hardware. We bring that all together for them, and we pull that into our system, which measures non-conformances. And the way we do that is through having bespoke workflows, which is your standards of care, your SOP, that we measure what's happening in real time against. So you'll have particular requirements for your company, for your own risk management, for your supply chain security and product integrity. And we measure, or the system automatically automates that process and is measuring all of the time what should be happening against what is. And then it automates those corrective actions to resolve the issue in real time. So this is generating a lot of data which can then be used in terms of reporting and to help drive operational efficiencies within your own business, resulting in cost savings. Next slide, please. So bringing all of that information together, we have our Sentinel platform. And what I wanted to sort of showcase here is that global ability to bring all of these sources together. And then in terms of prioritizing risk, we set that into a low, medium, and high risk based upon your requirements and the exception management that you want to have for your solution. And this can be utilized in one of 2 ways. We can either send exception managements directly to a person that's going to be responsible for it, or it becomes an instant global security operations service for your business, where this is the monitoring platform, providing them that risk assessed information on what's happening within the supply chain. But we also have at Overhaul our Overwatch team, which is specialists in managing this. So if you wanted to outsource it or didn't have resources, we can facilitate that on a global basis for you. Next slide. And this really goes into very detailed information. As I said, we have a mobile app where drivers can complete checklists in real time, take photographs, and that information is fed up. But we also have warehouse digitizing solutions where the driver departure interview can be conducted, and that information is also pulled into the system. Various different compliance we can put on there in terms of red zones, route deviations, temperature alerts, etc. So it's very customizable for your requirements and your product, which is what's important to us. Next slide, please. So what we wanted to do in terms of case studies is COVID came pretty quickly, beginning half of this year, and really disrupted the supply chain. So we looked at 2 very different experiences with our customers. One, an existing customer that already had this system in place, this global visibility and risk management platform. And the next one I'm going to show you is a new customer. So we'll start with the existing customer experience. The disruption came to the supply chain in incremental. The wave came over from Asia. We were aware it was going to happen. A result of this is an increase in security risk. And a good point, I suppose, from the COVID pandemic was the global focus on supply chain and the role that we all play. And some of those key workers within, particularly drivers who are very much at the forefront of ensuring products got delivered, needed protection. They needed physical protection in terms of their own social distancing, but also from that increased risk from criminals. In addition, because supply chains were disrupted, we had situations where there was a reduction in the availability of certain hardware devices for temperature monitoring. So our solution with an existing customer was continue as normal. We're there, built for risk management, built to adapt and to respond to disruptions. So they felt that that was pretty seamless in terms of they had already global visibility on where their shipments were. We had additional tracking in terms of looking at flight delays, airport closures. Because we were device agnostic, we were able to source additional hardware that we were already integrated with, so they had a solution that was instantly good to go. And we've developed additional contextual overlays to the ones that we had, which helped them through this. So I will talk a little bit about that in a moment. But they had the GSOC monitoring them. We obviously pushed out any intelligence that we could share with them. And we have a really unique product, which is LE Connect, and it's a insurance really for, we try to prevent anything happening within the supply chain, but when something does happen and a theft does occur, LE Connect has all of that data on the shipment instantly available in a magic link to send direct to law enforcement to aid the recovery of stolen products. So they felt very comfortable. It resulted in for them transparency, risk management. They had additional COVID infection rate overlays in our system that we built in, and population at risk to protect the staff and the drivers, supply chain intelligence being pumped through to them, and most important to them, they were able to maintain continuity of supply, which is really key. If you'd like to go to the next slide, please. We really wanted to support the industry. So when this happened, we had the discussion, as many organizations did, as to what can we do. So we announced that we would support those that didn't have any mobile tracking of their shipments, and we shared that support through the HDA's PCSE and its members. And the customer took advantage of that. They were having issues with regards to supply chain, a complete lack of visibility, and were concerned about the implications on their staff and also the product as well. So we onboarded them incredibly quickly, and that's the benefit of an off-the-shelf solution such as this. They had an instant solution where they could monitor their trucks traveling around. In addition to that, some of our features such as the mobile app gave them that ability to have distance, so they could maintain social distances whilst completing checklists on their own device, which was really important for their health and safety. And the results for them were an off-the-shelf solution. They got that intelligence and the risk management solution, and the return on investment was kind of immediate value because they were protecting their continuity of supply, but also they had an immediate business resiliency planning solution. Next slide, please. So what we did when this situation happened is that we obviously implemented our own contingency plans. That's what we do. That's what we're good at. We offered the industry support out there, and we increased some of our data overlays on our system. We already had weather traffic points of interest such as way stations, and we moved that to include things like airports and ocean ports statuses, so whether there are any delays there, border crossings, which was a huge problem in Europe, delays at border crossings. But we also added COVID-19 infection rates and a population at risk location. So we could combine information on which area had a very high risk of infection, plus the population that was most at risk of being affected by it, by understanding and knowing what chronic illnesses people in that location were experiencing. In addition, our most recent data overlay is civil unrest. So we added some of the protest data and fed that intelligence to protect drivers throughout the supply chain. Next slide, please. And just a bit of an overview here, we can see that we have the at-risk population. It just gives you an example, and this is just one of the data overlays that we have. So you can toggle on and toggle off as to the different information that you want to be able to see. But here, this is really important in terms of government, asset location, demand planning, looking at the protection of staff, but also things like if you know you have a manufacturing facility in a certain location, which is at very high risk, there will be implications in terms of staffing and people being off work. So it helps in many of the logistics optimization processes and your planning as well. And so we just really wanted to showcase some of this information with you. Next slide, please. Okay, so back to Kevin. I think, are there any questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions there. Thanks, Amy. Nice presentation there.
You're very
So
welcome.
many people out there, logistics providers out there have solutions like this. So is this something that's redundant? Can it be adapted to? What's unique about it?
Yeah, so we're really embracing the industry. We want forwarders, we want Internet of Things, hardware solution providers to be going on that digital journey towards Industry 4.0, because what we do is we feed off all of that data and put that into our rules engine, which is really the key to making sure that we have those standards of care. So we embrace anybody out there who is on that journey, who does digitize. I think we'll see in the next presentation by Don, it is an example of a company that is digitizing and going down that journey. What we offer for the shippers is the ability to aggregate that on a global basis to manage standards of care for risk management and visibility. So it gives them procurement flexibility in terms of being able to leverage the best solutions out there.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. So obviously the pandemic has caused many companies to experience delays, cancellations, really true disruption in their supply chain. Is technology the answer? Is that what they need to turn to, like type of solution that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that digitalization of processes is going to be something that will, in 10 years' time, just be very mainstay. And I think that what we're at is that the ability to really manage issues in real time, using predictive analytics to prevent things happening within the supply chain, but then actually really knowing what's happening on the ground and the condition of our freight, our shipment at any point. So we're looking at protecting product integrity, supply chain security to make sure products are safe for people. So it's really important. And I think that having all those additional layers of security, so when we're taking a data feed, we're not just taking an IoT device or a GPS logger, we're building up all of that data, tapping into telemetry, flight aware, vessel trackers. So there's really no single point of failure. If one device doesn't work, there are so many other systems that we have in place that we're tapping into, which really build that kind of secure solution.
Makes sense. Absolutely. I think we got time for one more here, Amy.
Okay.
One just came in here. For our air shippers and ocean shippers, that type of visibility available for those applications as well in modes of transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's completely multimodal. We are working with global shippers who are using all of the different modes of transport. We have the ability to connect in various different ways. So from an air freight shipment, we then, as soon as obviously that goes in flight, there can't be transmission of IoT devices. But what we do is we'll know that that shipment has got on that flight. We then will track the flight so we know when that's arrived. So very similar with the ocean freight as well. So it is completely multimodal and global solution.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Amy. I think we're going to move on to Don right now. So we'll join you here in a little bit for the fireside chat.
Fantastic.
So when we bring Don Durm into the mix there, Don, you're certainly big advocate of technology, and you heard some of the things that Amy talked about. So what are you going to share with our audience today?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about the a technology-enabled supply chain. So this is going to be the future of supply chain. We just kind of wanted to go walk you through that. Next slide. I don't think I'm able to control the slides at this point. Thank you. So a little bit about PLM. So we're a refrigerated transport asset fleet management company. We are technology driven. We control well over 12,000 refrigerated trailer assets throughout the United States. And so some of the things that we've done, we were on the leading edge of telematics in 2006. We've introduced an all-electric TRU. Yes, no diesel engine on that refrigerated trailer. And we're also providing last mile solutions as the new business models are being operated now. Food safety is a big one for PLM. Training, meeting FSMA requirements, Food Safety Modernization Act. And this is what I work in, the food safety solutions. And so we're going to be presenting a new product called TrustLink for the cold chain. And most of you are going to be saying, hey, you're a transport company. Why are you doing, with supply chain solutions? Because we've been able to take a look at supply chains, at the connectability of it throughout the supply chain itself. And so we've looked at all the gaps and stuff, and it's gave us this unique ability to see kind of what's out there and then what the gaps are in that. So please, next slide. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the industry challenges. So in the world, there are 600 million people that report illness just by the act of eating something. I'm sorry, and that's 1 out of 10 people. In the US, that's actually 1 of 6 people that report some kind of food illness. We may report a little bit better than other nations. Food fraud, $45 billion. Oceania reports that a third of our seafood is actually misrepresented. You're not actually getting what you're paying for. And of course, food waste. 40% of our food is thrown out, and that's worldwide, and that also works for the U.S. also. We've got challenges with recalls. We just had a recall this morning on lettuce, salads, and so Aldi's is affected, Hy-Vee, and a number of other retailers. So 55% of consumers say they'll stop buying all lettuce, for that moment. 15% say they'll never come back to that particular brand again. So these are big challenges in food service and food distribution, and a brand is very important to each of us. So next slide, please. So let's really talk about the ecosystem, the cold chain ecosystem. I mean, we've all heard it, farm to fork. Everybody's got that, the fact is that our supply chains are actually getting longer. They're not getting shorter. We like to think we're buying local food, but it's actually getting longer and longer. And so these supply chains, there's all these handoffs with different stakeholders all through it. And those are not connected. They all have different ERP systems. Everybody has a challenge. With FDA, all the handoffs are only one up, one back. So there are challenges with that. So everybody has this information and it's really not connected. Although we like to think it's all connected, it's not. And so at times it takes FDA several weeks to find out that there's a problem in the, where to identify that problem. So that is why we have these challenges. Sometimes they don't even find it. Last year, you might remember the recall with romaine lettuce. And FDA finally said we're not putting romaine lettuce on the recall list because the growing season in Yuma, Arizona is over. So they never did find it. So there was no more being grown. So therefore, the problem just went away for them. So it's very important that we're looking at what the connectivity of our supply chains are. And this was a real challenge in COVID. Bringing that back to the relevant conversation today, is that when you don't have that connectivity, there is a challenge in finding out where your product is and where to direct it to. So next slide, please. So really want to talk about a solution. You might say, Don, you work for a transport company. Well, what are you doing with at case level conversations? And because we've had this unique ability to take a look at this, we've actually been working on a solution for a couple of years now. And what is that solution? So we've learned that we can embed technology into a case itself. So an IoT device, in this case, we used RFID. And so that RFID was embedded into the case itself. And we then were able to digitize that product and put it into a cloud-based system. And so you can actually look at it wherever you're at and follow it through the supply chain system. And then we're able to utilize that information through the connectivity of the scans itself, all the different handoffs that go in the supply chain. And we're able to give tracking events, some insights and things like that. In this particular case, we also utilize the blockchain. And so don't get really concerned about, we'll talk probably a little bit about blockchain, but don't get too wrapped up into that word, but just know that it goes to a repository is where this information is going. So next slide, please. So we worked with a beef company, a beef processor, and we wanted to identify their business challenges, quality, safety, waste, fraud, and any inefficiencies that they had. So the three big buckets that we actually were able to group these things under were increased cost, lower sales, and then increased risk. All of these impact the bottom line. And so we looked at increased costs, we looked at order fulfillment errors, okay? Any distributors out there have the wrong product at the wrong place with your customer? Well, that's one of those fulfillment errors. Inaccurate inventories. In this case, counting things. There was human errors in counting those things throughout their supply chain. Where my product is when you process beef, you have aged challenges with fresh beef. And if you've misplaced it, you've got a real challenge in there. Excursions. In this case, we talked about temperature excursions. Detentions, again, wrong place, wrong time. Lower sales, quality discounts. How could we help the beef processor with quality discounts? Did the product arrive in the condition it was supposed to be? They're utilizing, in this case, third-party logistics companies. So that was very important for them to understand. Any type of rejections that they've got, incomplete deliveries, counterfeit product. I'm saying that this is this particular product, but it's not. It's somebody else's. And then all those increased risks for non-compliance for the way it's supposed to be there, recalls, claims, disputes, and also product liabilities. Next slide, please. And so what do? We looked at blockchain enablement in this case. We digitized the case itself. So we put the IoT device on that case itself. We're able to digitize the pallet. Then we're able to digitize the trailer loads, and then actually digitize the arrival and the exit of the trailer, and then we also digitize the receipt. So you're able actually to follow the product at an individual case level throughout the facility itself and as it travels to the customer itself. Next slide, please. So we were able to provide a proof of delivery. In this case, we also provided temperature. So in this case, we're able to tie in not only the transactional, we also had of the different handoffs, we're also to supply temperature in this case. So when you got a scan, you not only got where it was scanned at, but and you were also able to get the temperature of what the product was. This technology had the capability of continuously logging all during the supply chain events and be able to feed that data in there. So what we were able to do, we were able to be able to share with the supply chain partners when the trailer was loaded and what product was on that trailer. So customers could actually see their particular pallet full or their 2 pallets fulls of product. They could see when it entered the trailer. They could see when it was in the yard. They could see when it left the yard. They could also see when the beef supplier could also see when it arrived at their facility. And then they could also see when it was received. So next slide, please. So what does this look like? I've kind of talked about this. So it looks like a standard GS1 barcode. We're actually putting an RFID. It's a dog bone in the lower left-hand corner there. And we actually put that technology underneath the GS1 barcode, the 128 barcode. And with this, so it looks and you can scan it. And what's the beauty of RFID is I don't need line of sight. So I do not have to scan each one of these barcodes. So if I have 50 of something on a pallet, I can be in proximity. So it's radio waves. I pick all that up, all that information up very easily. It just loads all 50 cases. So I get accurate inventory, exactly what's on there. Next slide, please. So what does it look like? So I can actually capture the digital movements or the movements digitally when it goes through a warehouse or a facility. So on the left-hand side, you can see as it passes through, I'm collecting that data. I know exactly what it is. And in this case, where it's moving to and what part of the warehouse. You can actually enhance this by putting RFID readers and antennas up in your facility, and that gives you that ability to push a button and see exactly where my inventory in the warehouse at any given time to be able to do that. No more counting, no more walking through the aisles and looking at that. Next slide, please. So I can also use the hand scanner and just code it right onto the trailer itself and actually capture those movements and share that information if I wanted. or I could put paddle readers at the back of docks. So think about a time when you may have walked out of the Home Depot and all the bells and whistles went off and said, oh, can you come back inside? Let me check your receipt. Oh, we forgot to demagnetize this. So this is the same principle that we're taking from retail, moving it into that cold, wet environment of food distribution. And so think about a day in which when you're loading your refrigerated trailers, all that information, if you go in there and you put the wrong product on the wrong trailer, it will tell you immediately what's going. Or if your customer unloads the wrong product at a different location that it wasn't supposed to be, you could be identified of that. And that's exactly what happened in the POC. So next slide, please. So we're able to digitize also documents. So think about a world in which, especially COVID, we all thought bill of ladings were the most important document in the world. And today that's kind of changing. And so bill of ladings aren't as important, but this can now travel with the case itself. So a simple scan, I can have that bill of lading that's on there. Other documents, such as in this case with a beef producer, they have COA, Certificate of Analysis. These are the analysis that that the protein will go through, that you want to ensure that it's safe. And so this Certificate of Analysis can be actually applied while the product is en route. Many customers want to see that. Sometimes it's not available because that's why we have recalls. This product, as many cattle come in the back, have to leave out the front. And so as it's in distribution, we can actually attach these type of documents and then be able to pull that information. So when it gets scanned, the customer can have those. And think about a world in which when you scan now, you can actually talk to the individual case and say, you know what, there's a hold on this, or there's a recall on this. Don't go any further. I don't need to recall all 150,000 cases that I just sent out. I might only have a problem with 10 that I need to speak with. So this is the ability and the advantage of working with a digital platform like this to be able to digitize our food at the case level. And one day we look to digitizing at the package level also. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to thank you, and these are different ways that I can follow. And I think we're back to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it. So really good stuff there, Don. Appreciate all you're doing for the industry and making us more aware of the technology that's out there. So you talk about blockchain, right? And sometimes when we hear blockchain, we kind of don't really know what it all is or how it operates. But without going into theory here, from a practical application, how does blockchain technology why is it an interesting case for, say, the food service industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say that we're coming into a world of a digital conversion of IoT devices. Okay, we all have cell phones. We all have we're able to manage ourselves, soccer practice, our whole work environment. We're doing this digitally. Today we don't have to be in person. We can do all these things. So there's a digital convergence that's going on. The way you think of this is that in the 80 years ago, we started to build interstate systems. Okay, so think of it like that. We started to connect towns and villages together, and what blockchain does is basically connect all these different little ERP systems that do not talk to one another to a highway system that can now communicate along that same interstate system. So that's the way I would think about that. I would also say that FDA is moving in that direction. So and so is USDA. They've got a partnership. And so this past October, they had a meeting. Frank Yarnis had a meeting with called the new era of a smarter food safety system. Okay, so we had a big major change in this industry for food. It's called the Food Safety Modernization Act, and I would dare to say there was nothing modern here. It was basically the same stuff. So I speak on that quite regularly. There's nothing modern here. So now we are, when he says the new era of a smarter food safety, what he's really talking about now is that IoT device, that smart, that technology-enabled food supply chain system. So I think those are the things, when you're looking at that, the errors that we're having and things like that. So blockchain is an interesting case for that. So when you're looking at blockchain, theory is really tough in it. I would say, if you're thinking about this, how electricity comes out of the wall, I really couldn't explain that to you. I just trust that, I plug in my computer, it's going to work, and power it up. I would also say, sending an email across the World Wide Web. How that works, I really couldn't tell you the theory of that. I just know it works and I accept that. So don't get wrapped up in technology, the theory part of it, because you'll miss the boat.
Very good. We've got a question that came in, but first I want to touch on something real quick, Don. You mentioned that meeting that you went to, you were invited to by Frank Giannis as an industry expert, which says a lot about your what the industry thinks of you in general. Any insights from that meeting that you think might be helpful for the audience today that you learned from that experience?
Yeah, so in that meeting, they really touched on really four main topics there, that they divide us up in groups to have these conversations. So one was food safety culture, okay, that food safety is people-enabled, people-driven. So it's really about educating people for food safety. The other one was about regulating new business models. And one of them that was brought up was last mile, okay? Because when they came up with the Food Safety Modernization Act, they really didn't address, from the grocery store to the home or from the restaurant to the home. And so this has left a lot of vulnerabilities there, a lot of gaps in there. So there is a willingness to take a look at it. Some laws will have to be changed for sure, but I can tell you they're actually looking at those things. I would also say that, really looking at a smarter tech-enabled, how do they supply chain system, how can they do testing, get it out there more quickly, and to do that. And then the last was really a tech-enabled traceability. How can I track and trace through the supply chain using technology? The barcode is not working anymore.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Don. I think that's very helpful. One question that came in from the audience, I'm going to read this off and then we'll transition into fireside. So technology adds costs, as we all know, to the supply chain. How would you advocate for the implementation of technology solutions like, say, TrustLink, for example?
Yeah, so that's really good. So I've been working with customers on what's the four walls, okay? What's the four walls added value to my particular facility or what I'm doing? And so the challenge is, it's great to put technology in the beginning, and people and businesses will not. But what's the payback? It's got to drive additional costs. Pushing food down the supply chain is a 2% business at best. There's not a lot of money in it. They just have to push a lot of food. So really, one of the things that we looked at really is that time-saving things, and then the ability of counting things, in your facility. I've looked at some industry studies that have been done where only 8.2% of the supply chain is actually monthly counting their inventory. Almost 50% never count it. So, it's the velocity of food that's moving down the supply chain so quick that we're not able to actually physically count it. And so we're having these challenges to say, what products do I have? So, that ability to look at the dates, everybody's slapping on new barcodes. So you have a technology, so when you scan it in, you're downloading your information to that particular case. That's where it's really important. So to be able to source all these documents are really important there.
Excellent. Thank you for that question from the audience. That was a good one. So Amy, if we could bring you back into the mix, we're going to pivot into a little bit of a fireside chat. Nice job, Don, Amy, both of you with your presentations. Thank you for that. So what I heard a lot about is data. It's great if you know what it means and you know what to do with it. I think that's where technology comes into play, where you have the ability to take action with that, right? So question I'd like to throw out to Amy, you first. So what are some of your thoughts on how the cold chain industry in general will need to adapt to the new reality that we're living through?
Okay, so yeah, thank you for inviting me back for the, I think maybe more fire pit chat. I was thinking it's like 30 degrees here, so mid 80s, and I know that Don is in Florida. So yeah, I think that what's really important is kind of going back to basics. So looking at your lane risk assessments, the validation, making sure that you have enough contingency in your temperature control packaging, for example, whilst also ensuring that you're not over engineering the solution as well. So I think that those areas, in addition to that, within any logistics, what we're seeing is that the even somebody coming to deliver a parcel to my house, proof of deliveries, those types of things are now being done in a slightly different way. We're no longer signing or touching anything. So ensuring that there is those social distancing, security and health and safety elements to it as well. I think with a lot of cold chain packaging, we're also seeing some issues with supply and demand as well. And I think that leads into a broader conversation in terms of what we've been doing, which is that just-in-time lean manufacturing, only having enough stock. And that certainly had an implication on things like PPE as well. So it's really kind of questioning the complex supply chains that we have and looking at there are other ways that we can be doing it. And I think that there will be some changes and diversity and strategy there.
Nice. Don, what do you think about that question? Some changes. How are we going to adapt to the new reality?
Yeah, so COVID has really created quite a challenge for the industry. Okay, so the NRA, the National Restaurant Association, reported at the beginning of this year that 51% of the dollars spent by consumers was done in restaurants. So think about that for a moment. Okay, so when COVID hits, all of a sudden this new paradigm just changes where all the restaurants are closed. You can't go in there because of social distancing. So everything moved into the channel of grocery. All right, and so the inability of supply chain to be able to flip between the two market segments was a really big challenge here. We currently have, and I'll just add to that is, so you think about that for a moment. 51% of the U.S. consumer were eating at restaurants. So if you lose any of that during this time, during the comeback, okay, so let's say it drops to 40% are eating in restaurants, and then we go to 60% we're eating meals. That actually does a paradigm shift in the industry. So I deal with refrigerated trailers. All right, so these shorter trailers that deliver into restaurants, the 28s and 36s, what happens to that business? Okay, so that's going to have to shrink. And then the grocery that delivers to the grocery stores, that trailer is typically a 48-footer. Okay, that will have to expand. The normal point A to point B to the distributors who do for both will stay the same as a 53-footer. So people are not eating less here. I would say they're probably eating more, but it's what channel are we actually going to get that? I would also add that new business models are being created even right now. So, we've always had problems for these new business models, like, for restaurants to feed homes, for grocery to deliver to homes, has been because of capacity issues. They haven't been able to fill that truck up to be able to get there. That's changing now. Okay. So I've got a son that says, you know what? I like this. I don't have to go to the grocery store anymore. I've set a new pattern. So 4 months, 5 months, we're doing this. We have new patterns that we're setting. So these new business models will be doing, and how will each of these take effect? I see that restaurant distributors are actually shifting in that. So touchless, those types of things. Cost. Okay, how can you drive cost out of this? And everybody's going to be looking at this, and technology will be a way that you can do that.
Yeah, very good. Good detail there. Vulnerabilities, right? We all have them in our supply chains. We should be looking at them every day to figure out how we can mitigate that risk. But generally speaking, which vulnerabilities have you seen? We'll start with you, Don, in the supply chain that have been exposed in light of the recent pandemic that we're living through.
Yeah, supply chain doesn't talk to one another. It's not connected. It's, so we all see gaps, I mean, I've heard people say, the supply chain bend, but it didn't break. It broke. Okay. You didn't have your stuff, you didn't have product inside your facility. We had potatoes rotting in the fields because we weren't able to make those shifts from that particular channel, from grocery to restaurant, which might, consumer packaging is different from restaurant packaging. I would also say that, the average, recall in this country, which we just had one this morning, had a couple of ground beef recalls, is $10 million per case. That is a vulnerability that we, one up, one back does not work anymore. So that was exposed really large in this COVID. These supply chains, again, do not talk to one another. And the fact is, these are not getting shorter. We're actually getting longer in what the supply chain is where we're grabbing food from. So consumers are demanding more and more information.
Excellent. Amy, how about you? Any vulnerabilities that you've seen out there be exposed recently?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting is that the mindset of embracing technology has taken almost a seismic leap forward. And I think that we see that in businesses that have succeeded through this pandemic have been very quick to either have already an e-commerce strategy or to implement one very quickly. And that's all the way down to just sort of local restaurants who flip and all of a sudden start doing deliveries of their products to customers directly. So I think that kind of it's really sort of sorted out those who are never going to embrace technology and never going to go down that path seems to be the ones that have failed. I think in a global supply chain, what we're seeing is that the situation is we have a lot of complex supply chains out there, which I think will start to kind of be looked at to see how we can maybe shorten some of those supply chains and look at more regional sourcing of certain components, because as soon as that wave hit Asia, we could see that knock-on effect, and that has had implications in global economy as well. So it's about sort of looking at the bigger picture. I also see the vulnerabilities there in terms of we need more cross-functional collaboration between industry and a little bit like, collaboration in silos within business. I think that collaboration in a wider sense of businesses working together, we can see how interdependent we are as an industry, and we are kind of all in this together. And I think that hopefully that will fuse some more conversations with regards to collaboration.
Excellent. Amy, I got another question here. You're very familiar with GDPs, right? Good distribution practices. What are some that you are seeing be adopted more recently in the cold chain? And could you speak a little bit about that? And maybe Don from the food side after Amy speaks.
Yeah, I mean, just best practice, I think, is what we're seeing. The push is becoming more downstream now. So we're seeing that whilst shippers are happy to be working to GMP, good manufacturing practices, there is now that expectation of every single person who is involved as an outsourced party. So that's the 3PL, the airline, the packaging companies, internet providers, that they are also working to those compliance standards. And they're not complex, they're basic common sense. And I think that what we're finding is that whilst in Europe, that's been really the expected standard for a very long time, and in parts of Asia as well. We're now starting to see that really infiltrate the US market. There's much more kind of positivity towards airlines, ground handlers, trucking companies embracing GDP and seeing the benefit that that gives them commercially, but also from a quality point of view and making sure that they're protecting their customers' products and brands.
Don, what do you think?
Yeah, so great question. So actually during the rules making process under the Food Safety Modernization Act, the agency identified stakeholders, shippers, loaders, carriers, and receivers throughout the supply chain. And 39 times in that document, they referred to, we're going to rely on industry best practices. Well, everybody looked around and guess what? Everybody had their own best practice. So there was no unifying program on that. So the Global Cold Chain Alliance commissioned and I was part of that. So they commissioned a task force that spent 2 years trying to get industry together, all the stakeholders from shippers to the loaders to manufacturers that make the equipment to the scientific community. and also transportation companies to agree on a best practices. That is available for a free download for anybody. So go to the Global Cold Chain Alliance website. It's a simple download. You just input your information, and that's free of charge. So they've also came up recently, just last year, a certification program. It's called the Certified Cold Carrier. And so if you want to get what you actually do validated, so there is a proof of conformance that you have to supply in your paperwork, and also you've got to take some tests. And so once that's completed, you get that designation. Two companies that have done that are KeHE Foods and also JB Hunt were part of the initial trial program on that. And so those are certified cold carriers in the industry. So it's a visible way of showing that. So those are resources that someone could use out there.
Excellent. Yeah, and I've heard a lot of positive things about the cold carrier program from other customers as well. So good resource there for sure. So we got about, please do, Amy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's a huge amount of similarities between the journey, and I've worked in perishable industry before as well, and the cold chain industry. And what you were saying, Dom, really speaks to that there is this the global compliances, even within the healthcare industry, vary country to country, region to region, and it's the responsibility of the healthcare authority to really kind of enforce which guidelines you need to follow. And I think that the journey that you were talking about, Don, in terms of forming coalitions and really working together for best practice, that's really what the healthcare pharmaceutical logistics has done. So I think that there's a lot of learnings, a lot of similarities between the perishable industry and the pharma industry under that big banner of cold chain as well. So there's a lot of similarities there as well. So yeah, it's nice to hear both sides.
So Amy, let me go ahead and add this, Amy, to the conversation here, is that when our agency here, the Food and Drug Administration, when they passed on these rules into food, they actually took a lot of the language from the drug industry, validation, certification. We're like, what is this? So they've actually moved that language into food. And so we are seeing a lot of blend over. So we've leaned heavily on that pharma industry to kind of help us navigate this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Excellent. Good call out there, Amy and Don. So I'll leave you guys with this. How about looking at your crystal ball? What do you see for the cold chain? Each maybe take about 30, 45 seconds to tell us what you see over the next decade or so. Amy, go ahead.
Okay, so I think that as we head towards Industry 4.0, which completely fascinates me, I think that companies have to be really clear on the narrative of what they want in terms of technology and visibility. Be really careful. We've seen some examples of customers that have gone in the wrong direction just because they think technology is going to be the panacea of all of their problems. And I think it's about really working with partners that understand the products, the procedures that you have, and can give that solution to you. Wasting a lot of time and effort on the wrong solution can cause a problem. So I think we'll see that it will become the mainstay. Technologies like blockchain and we know serialization, track and trace technology, we're going to have a lot more visibility and traceability of our products, and the standards are going to rise because of it from a food safety point of view and also from medicinal products.
Nice. Don?
Yeah, so there are going to be winners and losers coming out of this COVID immediately. So it depends. The consumer is really going to make that choice on what's going to where supply chains are going to go out and how they need to react. So supply chains are going to have to become more technology enabled so they can actually be more flexible in what they're doing. And so that's going to be really important. I would also agree with Amy in that, looking to adapt technology and going just only to technology companies to get that adoption can be a problem if they don't understand your business. And so seek out partners that really understand supply chains and where they're going and what's happening. I would also say look out for new business models, and then these home deliveries and what's going on, and the adoption of how you can flex your business and keep it nimble to move to those directions. So those were a couple things I would add to it.
Oh, great. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Don, Amy, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and attention today. Really good stuff you left our audience with. And thank you to your companies as well, PLM and Overhaul, for allowing you the time to work on this. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it, and well done. To our audience, very grateful for your time and attention today. A couple of takeaways for you. You will be getting a survey at the end of this. Please tell us. It's the only way we get better at these things. Tell us what you really think. The surveys are anonymous. So in that regard, you'll also be getting a recording of this webinar, which you'll be able to share with colleagues if you'd like. It'll be broken into 3 segments: Amy's presentation, Don's presentation, and then the fireside chat we just concluded. For those who did submit questions, and there are quite a few of them, thank you very much. The ones we did not get to, we have a plan in place to have Don and Amy answer those for you, and we'll be able to share that content with you. And then we also are going to have a piece of content shared from each one of them based on the information that's shared today, so you'll have that as a takeaway item, as a small thanks for attending today. So if you like what you heard today and you want to hear more of it, we started a LinkedIn group called Cold Chain Council. Please join. We appreciate the support. We'll be posting content there in the weeks ahead, and also get some shared content from folks in the industry as well. On behalf of the Cold Chain Council and the entire QProducts and Services team, we thank you very much. Stay safe and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.